Boosting productivity in a changing workplace and workforce. Greetings to our esteemed panel here. I'm going to ask them to please introduce themselves, tell us their organization, and also give us their personal productivity tip, what they do when they're feeling stuck. We'll start with you, Michal.
Thank you, Krissah. I'm Michal Alter. I'm based in New York City. I'm a founder and CEO of a company called visit.org, and we help corporations engage their employees in social impact activations. So we do a lot of ERG engagement, volunteering engagement, and so on. I tend to be go in front of my computer all day long. So my productivity tip for myself is I have a little note that says, do a breathing exercise. And it says, breathe 5, out 7, whatever it is. That's what I do.
Hello, everyone. I'm Millette Granville, and I am the leader of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging for a company called 2U edX. And our mission is #NoBackRow, because we are trying to eliminate the back row of education through online learning. And my tip for productivity is I'm a checklist person. So if I can check it off, it gives me this real satisfaction. And I know it's in my head, but it helps. So my tip is get you a checklist, and as you accomplish stuff, check it off.
That's great. Hi everyone, I'm Bipin Mistry. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of Alight Solutions. Alight Solutions, what do? We're basically help through platform and services for employers to help manage their human capital. And so that means, translating that means we essentially help employers help get their employees from hire to retire. And we have a number of services from benefits administration, enrollment, 401k, HSA management, to healthcare navigation and leaves administration and retiree exchange, so the whole gamut. And our tagline tends to be healthy mind, healthy body, healthy wallet, healthy life. My tip for productivity, so I have a dog that's getting slightly demented, so she needs to go out to the bathroom every hour, it seems. So the way of saying that is that it's about calendar management for me, making sure that the meetings don't run on, that they're limited to 45 minutes, and I don't stack 20 meetings in a day.
Good. Great.
Liz?
Hi, everybody. I'm Liz Jansen, and I'm with ICF. We're a consulting firm that focuses on things like disaster management, public health, climate, sustainability, so very much in the realm of social impact. And I lead talent and organizational development for the firm. And I'm the kind of person that adds an item to my checklist after I did it and check it off. I don't know if anyone does that. But my productivity tip is about chunking. So if you're like stuck and you have a huge project, you kind of break it into chunks. Then you just say, okay, I'm going to do it for 10 minutes. And then you usually will get more done. So that's my tip.
Yeah, I love that. Hi, well, good afternoon. It's been an amazing day so far. I'm Tammy, Kess, and I have the privilege of leading HR and corporate communications for General Dynamics Information Technology, or GDIT. We are a large federal government contractor. We have 27,000 employees across the globe. And what we do really is provide IT solutions and systems for the most critical missions within the federal government across defense, intel, and the federal civilian agencies. And we also do work with state and local governments. So we run a system that forecasts the weather for NOAA, right? We run a claims processing system for Medicare claims. We do research for CDC, NIH, et cetera. So think of any federal government, we are probably supporting their mission in some form or fashion. Productivity tip, I'll go maybe a little off the direction as the rest of the panel. And I would say, leading HR, a lot of times we might feel a little undervalued, right? Like are all the things that we're focusing on, are they making a difference? So I keep in one of my email folders, emails that I get from employees that are really encouraging about, thank you for introducing that new benefit last year, or thank you for this care concierge service that we now provide through Wealthy. So I keep those in my emails and I share them with the executive leadership team. And then if I'm really getting stuck and wondering, are what we're doing making a difference, I'll go and read one of those. So
I love that. You have to inspire yourself.
Yes.
And breathe.
Just remind
us.
Breathe, check. Yeah.
And calendar maintenance and chunk it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I don't have to tell you all, we live in unprecedented times. Coming out of the COVID pandemic, it's barely in the rearview mirror. There's global turmoil. Presidential election promises to be divisive. We're pretty stressed. And when you think about the environment that we're in, how does that impact how you coach managers and leaders, particularly when it comes to watching for signs of burnout and stress? Can we start with you, Tammy?
Sure. Well, I love this question. So I wish you guys could just come spend a day at GDIT and see how we're focusing on employees and employee wellness. So stress, anxiety, burnout, it's real. Are you guys feeling that where you are? Like it's real, right? And 1 in 5 adults within the United States will experience mental health every year. So we are on this journey, like one of our phrase words for this year is this journey around community and really providing opportunities for employees to build communities within GDIT. We're a very large company, so that focus on building community can help make our really large company feel small. I think just in addition to that, I kicked off a mental health campaign several years ago called How Are You Really? And that is a multifaceted campaign that is really focused on raising awareness around mental health, but also offering opportunities to have those discussions in the workplace. And it's been really encouraging to see how just offering the opportunity to talk about that in the workplace is increasing productivity and connectedness and community. So that focus includes our Connect site, which is our internet site, resources on how to have conversations with employees and colleagues around stress, right, anxiety. Like there's a whole framework in there on how to ask the question, right? The do's and don'ts of how to ask the question to try to get folks to open up and share what they're dealing with. And then we have really targeted training for our people managers. We have over 4,200 people managers across the globe, and really providing them with the resources, going through role playing with them so that they understand how to have those conversations. And I think for us, like we're really just trying to raise awareness, destigmatize talking about mental health, and sharing with our employees it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to not ask for help. And we feel as an employer we have a role to play in that. So that's part of what we're focusing on at GDIT.
That's really great framing. How are you really?
How are you really?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going to talk about a lot of subjects. Bipin, I'm going to turn to you. I felt like you wanted to say something on the how are you really piece, but would you also talk to us a little bit about how managers can deal with issues like burnout and cognitive overload, first for themselves, but also for their teams?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, the beauty of what we can see at Alight is we see across a number of employers and seeing how they're doing and tackling such problems. I think to your point, training the manager is really key. And so there's a lot of resources out there, not just making them aware of, how to recognize stress and anxiety in the workforce, but also how are they coping with trying to address that situation. There's one incident talking about role playing. I was talking to one employer, and they actually brought in some actors. And the CMO said to me, Bipin, that was really stressful because the actors did such a good job that it really you felt you were in that moment with the anxiety and stress. So those are some of the things that, we learn from sort of role playing and education and so forth. I think the other thing that, the bringing in sort of folks to talk to the workforce and say it's okay to be, honest and open about and vulnerable with your stress and anxiety, because everyone else is stressed, etc. So in fact, in one survey that we did, you say 1 in 5 have some kind of behavioral health problem, but in our survey we had 75% of people express some degree of stress and anxiety. Wow. So we're probably underestimating it, to be honest. And so that's some of the strategies is trying to sort of say you can be vulnerable. remove the stigma. There may be some cultural barriers that you have to look at as well. You know, not everyone wants to go and see a doctor or anybody at all, or seek healthcare. And then finally, sort of figuring out what your strategy is from a well-being point solution perspective, whether that's through rewards or having telehealth solutions. And bearing in mind, telehealth solutions aren't necessarily always the answer. And I think one of the things that I see as a physician is, on the healthcare side, is access to providers. And so that's where having some navigation services for behavioral health is really key. And it's not just the employee, we also have to think about the family unit. What we've seen in our data is that 20% of our behavioral health guidance is for pediatric and adolescent conditions. So let's not forget that element of the parental unit and how that affects productivity and work. Those are some of the things that we're seeing, and also having some flexibility in the day so that people can actually go to appointments if they do find a provider. And then there's some other strategies that I've seen where your health plans have a limited network, and so we're seeing a lot of people sort of look to broaden the network of behavioral health providers. So there's multiple ways to do it. It's just a case of understanding your population, understanding how people interact and how you engage with them.
Great, thank you. Liz, want to ask you, when it comes to creating a healthy workplace culture, how can HR work with managers to help set sustainable goals and measure performance?
Sure. We've been on a journey around performance management over the last 3 years. We heard our employees through the survey and focus groups say they want to connect what they do to the company mission, and that they wanted more frequent feedback. We had a year-end process, and that they also wanted to focus on their career growth. I mean, that was the number one reason why people were leaving. So we went on a journey of reimagining that whole process, and part of that began with cascading goals from the top so that employees could then tailor their goals but connect to the broader goals and see how their work contributed to the company's success. We then went to quarterly check-ins instead of an annual review. And the idea was that's more frequent, so people are getting feedback more frequently, but then we also changed up the conversation. So it was, let's talk about how you're doing in your performance and against goals, and let's adjust your goals if we need to. But let's talk about your career and what do you want to do and how can you be developing? So they moved from rear view to future focused. And we use our Workday system to provide a template to the employee. The employee initiates the conversation, but they capture that in there. And then we also introduced anytime feedback. So an employee and or a manager can at any time request feedback. So it's at the end of a project. You ask that project manager for feedback, and then that rolls into the system. And our recognition also rolls into the system. So if they got an e-card or an award, for that conversation, you have the feedback, you have the checklist, you have the recognition, the goals, and you can really have a rich conversation to help you go through that next quarter. So it's been very impactful. We test sort of the effectiveness, and our employees are saying it's really helped a lot. We didn't make it mandatory, and we've seen a growth in adoption, 50% year over year. And our next thing is to tackle ratings. We couldn't get leaders to do away with ratings. We were going to try words. We got rid of decimals. So that was
baby steps.
Right. So that's a little bit about what we've been doing around performance.
Great.
Yeah, you'll have to let us know if you figured out how to get rid of ratings.
Yeah.
From 5 to 3, but to go to 0 has been.
I talked to somebody
really hard
today that was getting rid of ratings. So I'll let you know what she says.
Yeah.
Great. Millette, I want to shift us a little bit to talk about some changes in expectation in the workplace. We know that it's changed drastically, particularly what people expect of companies. What can companies do to help people feel connected and included? And how does that relate to employee retention?
Well, I think it definitely relates to employee retention pretty significantly. We were in a great session earlier today around belonging, and it's definitely, the research shows that employees that feel like they belong are going to stay longer, they're going to be more innovative, and they're going to connect. And so one way that I think companies, I can speak for the company I work for, is we want to tap into what our employees need from day one. So in onboarding, one of the things that we make sure that we're sharing with them is information about our 9 business resource groups and how they can get connected, because how many of you know when you find your people, it makes everything better. So if you're able to connect with a resource group, like in week 2 of your employment, you're going to be able to feel a sense of belonging and inclusiveness early on. The other thing that we do at our company, part of our guiding principles, one of them is being candid, open, and honest. And so part of our commitment is to have that transparency. So when you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, our employees really want to know, like, what are we doing? So we host global DEI updates for the entire company twice a year, and we share with them our actual demographics so that they can get connected with where we are, where we're going. We also have business diversity councils. So we encourage our employees to not only sign up, raise your hand to be involved in that, but it also gives them an opportunity to be engaged with the leadership in a different way, to meet other coworkers that they may not be able to work with. And so that's been something that we've also implemented that has caused our employees to feel like they have some stake in the game and they can connect in a different way. The other thing that we do, which I believe is really brave, we don't do this often, but we host what we call AMAs, which is Ask Me Anything. So
journalists like that, yeah.
It definitely is. It's a hard thing to do sometimes for leaders, but it does make leaders feel, it does make our employees feel empowered to ask questions and to show up and be connected to the leadership in a different way. And so we want to continue to do that. And I think companies that are brave enough to get in front of their employees and do that, it will create that trust factor, which is also big. The last thing I would say too is, a lot of our departments have created employee engagement committees so that the engagement doesn't just happen across the board in the company in general, but you'll have good pockets of engagement where employees are actually leading those initiatives. They are owning it, they are driving it. And I think that is a big piece of how you not only increase your productivity, but your leadership skills, how you engage with people, all of that. And the last thing I would say is we have really cool recognition programs. And we all know that, everybody gets motivated differently, but it's definitely been shown that if you can show your employees that you value them, that you recognize them on a regular basis, they're going to strive harder to, beat that last mark. And so we do #NoBackRow awards, which are tied to our guiding principles. We do awards within each department, and we do You Earned It points. And so there are ways to empower our employees to connect with other people and show their appreciation.
That's great.
I have something to add. Thank you for sharing all of that. That's, first, we also do AMA every Wednesday for half an hour at 12 noon. Globally, everyone is more or less available.
Brave souls.
Yeah. And it's
Weekly.
been a tradition that's going on for a long time, and it's been extremely successful, and everyone does it, leadership and everyone else, from the most junior to the most senior. It creates that culture of just sharing, and some of the questions are funnier, others are more serious. But I also, since you mentioned employee resource groups, I wanted to add to it what we do at visit.org. A lot of time with a lot of our corporate partners, we tend to work with global companies. We work in over 90 countries around the world, and these employee resource groups leaders who take this leadership position, they also have their own full-time roles in the company. And so as much as our corporate partners want to empower them and to give them that leadership opportunity, a lot of time it just creates overwhelming, stress and so on. So they really come to it with good intentions. but then do they have the tools to carry out what they want to see in their organization? And what we do is we are kind of their tool in their back pocket to carry out employee engagement for their ERGs on different topics. So what we do is we connect nonprofit organizations on any area, any community, any cause area that you can think about. And then ERGs leverage our content for team activations, for giving back opportunities, for educational opportunities about their communities, for intersectionality opportunities where ERGs can come together. So they're still the front, they're still the leaders, but they tap into our curated, culturally sensitive content to achieve their goals.
Michal, let's continue talking a little bit about that and also talk about mission. How do you link mission with productivity in a company?
Yeah, so I have an example for one of our corporate partners, actually, Gen Digital, a global technology company. They came to us post-pandemic, and they came to us with two challenges. One is post-pandemic, everyone is still at home and everyone is still, overwhelmed from that environment. The other challenge was that they just merged two different companies, NortonLifeLock and Havas, two security companies, came together. And so employees are now coming into this merged company with after experiencing a long period of working from home, plus feeling a lot of uncertainty for a lot of time because of the upcoming merge. And they came to us saying, our employees are feeling, the morale is just extremely low. What can we do? So together, we worked on putting together a large global day of service. That's what we do. We work with nonprofits all over the world, and we create content for volunteering and different types of team building, learning opportunities, and so on. But it always have a component of giving back. Whatever you do with us, you always give back to the community. We activated all of their employees in the Czech Republic, in India, in Ireland, and of course across the US and so on. And on this was the first time of the merged company doing something like that. And we got 25% participation rate, which is great. We have a baseline, it's amazing. And that became later on, the feedback that we got from Gen Digital was that became the moment in time where everyone felt that they are coming together. And from that point on, they saw the new beginning of the merged company. So they came back to us after that the following year, and now they've been with us for several years, and every year it's become a tradition. Employees now are asking to do it throughout the year, 365 days a year. So they have monthly activations, not only this one big annual event. So it really, that focus on a mission really brought everyone together to create a productive work environment.
That's great.
Well, can we add? Yeah. So I love that example, and I shared a little bit about the mission work that we do, and I think because we have so many programs across the globe, like it's really important to highlight the mission work that you're doing. So if somebody's working on a program that's doing vaccine research at NIH, like that's an example for us, like really being able to highlight and communicate internally what is the work that people are doing so that they can see the impact that they're having in protecting a warfighter or training a helicopter pilot or, finding a cure for, cancer or something like that. So a lot of times if you don't highlight that for them, they don't really have that connection to the mission piece, and that connection to the mission helps them understand the impact that they're having, and it really drives those retention rates up. So I know like all the companies represented here have incredible missions, but you have to highlight it, both internally and externally.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk a little bit about the nature of hybrid work and productivity. So many companies have abruptly become hybrid coming out of COVID. Pippin, I know that you work remotely. We talked a little bit about that in the green room. Tammy, I know you have some experience with hybrid companies as well. Interested in how we can ensure we're promoting inclusion in a hybrid workforce, particularly in spaces where the company wasn't remote prior to a few years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great topic. We've talked about it a lot today also. We heard a lot of things today, right? There's one size doesn't fit all. And I think especially for us, we have folks that over 50% of our workforce requires a clearance. And most of those folks have to work on site in a secured facility. And they did that all through COVID. So even during COVID, we weren't in a situation where everybody shifted to remote. It was only about half of our workforce. And now we're at a place based on the mission or the customer that we're serving. Those customers want our folks to be completely remote or maybe a variation of hybrid or on-site, based on the work that we're doing. As a company, we have always been more of an in-person sort of culture, even though we have people that have worked remotely for years and years before COVID. So it's really kind of figuring out how do you have an approach that balances all these ways of working, and then how do you drive sort of this community and connectedness across people working in all those different ways. So I think you have to be intentional, one, about defining flexibility, right? We talk a lot about flexibility, but what does that mean? And I think someone earlier today shared people come in at 10 and they leave by 3 and they do 2 days a week. So we have managers based on role talk to their employees and then figure out what is that appropriate level of flexibility, and then we capture that in our workday system and we sort of monitor that. But just knowing that we have employees that work differently, how do we connect them? And I loved your conversation on ERGs. So we have nine employee resource groups. Before COVID, most of those ERG events were in person. So we had this large percentage of our population that we never connected with. Then COVID hit, and now we're having ERG events and discussions virtually. Maybe not great initially, right? Because we didn't really know how to maybe hold the best virtual meeting. We didn't really know much about, hybrid. So I feel like we really learned, sort of best practices around holding truly hybrid events. And now through our ERGs, we're able to reach people all across the globe, and they can feel connected to a community or an ERG that they had never been able to do before. And we're very intentional about our programming. Our ERGs are volunteer-led. They have an executive sponsor that's from the leadership team. We have a lot of, cross ERG collaboration and events, but we bring in industry experts. We have speaker series every month. We talk about mental health. We talk about, next week we have a session on building inclusive teams, which really I think ties to that inclusivity topic. Last week I hosted a session on understanding depression, right? And what are those questions that you can ask employees to sort of get to know where they are. So you can be a member of 9 ERGs or 1 ERG, and you don't even have to, you can be part of the Black Employee Network group and not be a person of color, right? Like we are embracing advocacy through those. So I think that's one way to do it. We're doing a lot of other things just focused on people and connecting people and really, really investing in our managers. And I will share the stat with you. And we heard a little bit on retention earlier. We saw a 21% decrease in voluntary attrition last year in 2023. So it has to be a very multifaceted strategy around investing in your managers, engaging your employees, being really intentional about your strategy, and building those communities.
That's an impressive statistic. Go ahead.
Yes, I loved everything you said.
She was going to say
and I think that we can't forget about equipping our people leaders with the right skills to manage and motivate a hybrid work environment. Because if you don't understand proximity bias, if you don't understand, why people get a little antsy if they're remote but 3 people on their team is in person, they're thinking about, do I have career growth? Can I move through the organization if I'm remote? And so I think part of our responsibility in the leadership space is to not only develop, provide information to help our people leaders understand how to engage their teams when they are hybrid, but to also make sure that you're paying attention to how what assignments are getting placed on this individual versus this individual. And we all think, out of sight, out of mind, you're not thinking about me because you're seeing my other colleagues. But if you're the leader, you need to make sure you're doing all the things you need to do to engage everybody in a way that's impactful and meaningful to them. Because I think sometimes we forget about that piece.
Yeah, that's very true. I think, leading in this moment is really hard.
Yeah.
We haven't figured this out yet. I mean, we have some strategies, and I think we're all adapting them, and these common themes of communication, connection, inclusion, and flexibility. I mean, those are all elements, but we're all still figuring it out. And so I think that's the challenge. We don't have a book to refer to on how to do
Or a guide
in
or
this moment
yeah.
right now,
And I think you have to be willing to try things and then if they don't work, pivot.
Yeah, fail fast.
Fail fast, but and be honest with yourselves about that. For sure.
Can I just add that, I think another piece here is that when we sort of look at what employees want from an employer, understanding their benefits so that they can navigate in these situations where it can be very isolating, being remote, etc. And so what we've been trying to do is use signals from payroll and 401k and claims data to see if someone's going through a stressful moment and trying to sort of use AI and machine learning to try and create personalized journeys that matter to them, which then ultimately speaks to what benefits you should be providing for your employees based on the subpopulations that you're having with different cultures, stigma and DE&I, etc. So I think there's some other strategies that as a HR person you can use to try and drive awareness and engagement of resources that can support someone in their roles wherever they are in the company.
Great idea.
I've neglected to mention AI as one of the factors now.
First time ever this year.
Impacting productivity and maybe causing some of us some stress. Are there other ways that we're thinking about AI as a tool for HR and for our people leaders? Anybody else want to chime in there? I saw some nods, but maybe we all want to take that back and think about how it might apply.
Yeah, I mean, I can add to that. I mean, I love your example, and we're just starting to do that. We introduced an internal tool called Career Hub, and that it uses the Eightfold technology, which is an AI-based solution for talent acquisition. You have to get over compliance and legal hurdles to be able to use AI in the hiring process or the recruiting process. So we were using it initially for internal mobility, and there was a great discussion prior to this panel on internal mobility. So this provides employees the opportunity to upload their resume, put in their profile, tell us about jobs that they're interested in or roles that they're interested in. The tool will then identify what some of the openings are that might be a good fit for them. It'll also identify learning opportunities for roles that they don't have the skills yet to have. And then it links right into our learning management system and shows them a playlist for some of those learnings so they can get those learnings and those certifications. We have the networking function turned on in there too, so folks can search for people to network with internally at GDIT that have some of the same interests or the same roles, maybe find a mentor that way. And then the way we win new business is through requests for proposal. So a lot of our business, we don't know what we're going to be working on, next year, 3 years, or 5 years from now. So we're able to put those opportunities into Career Hub, and then employees can track those opportunities and say, oh, that's going to need an AI ML developer. I'd like to maybe be considered for that role, so they can get the learning and the certifications in advance of that program coming to us. So our next step is to really use this externally when it comes to hiring, and that is something that we're really trying to do over the next 12 months. But being a federal government contractor, we have different hurdles than some of the commercial organizations to get past on that. So we're on that journey.
Using AI to create connections.
Yeah.
Let's see. Michal, we talked a little bit about this, the research around volunteering and social impact and how important that is. You gave us a great example. How have you seen that in your broader work lead to increased retention, productivity, and wellness?
Well, first, there is a lot of research out there from just the past 2 to 3 years from everyone, from McKinsey, from Deloitte, from a very recent one from Edelman. I know we had a representative from Edelman earlier today. All of them show again and again and again prove that employee engagement in programming that give back, it could be volunteering, or it could be educational, or it could be fun team building experience, but as long as it's connected to the local community, that increase employee engagement, which in return increase employee retention, and in return employee productivity. So the numbers are out there. The recent Edelman research showed that 63% of employees expect their employer to show and demonstrate the commitment to their local communities. And these numbers go way up when we talk about the younger generation of employees. So that's just general research out there. And if anyone needs to help make the case to your CEO, we can share these numbers. More specifically, with our numbers, I just looked yesterday, I looked up our numbers. So I looked at a sample of 40,000 employees that participated in our volunteer events or ERG events. And at the end of each event, we put together an employee survey. We get really high response to the employee surveys, 60 to 70%, because we catch the employees in real time at the end of the event. Usually it's 1 hour long. So we really get a pulse of how our employees are feeling, or our corporate partners' employees are feeling again and again and again throughout the year. And the results, let me share some of the results. So 70% out of the sample of 40,000 employees who participated in these events, 70% of them are saying that this participating in this experience had a major impact on the way they feel in their experience at their company. 70% voted as a major impact. That's the highest score. That's number one. Number two, 99% of participants say that they want their employer to offer more of these social impact experiences. So that's across the board. And then the other interesting point there that I thought was also important is that 73% of the employees who participated in these experiences, volunteer opportunities or team building that give back in 1 year, 73% of them came back the following year. Now, when we work with the company, our goal is to increase participation. So whatever baseline we start with, we increase it to 20%, 50% participation, wherever the company is. So the more employees we get to participate in these events, 70% of them will want to be here with the same employer next year because they'll want to participate again. It's something that keeps them in the company. And then the last thing I want to share here is that we also have one open text question in our post-event service that employees just fill out with whatever their thoughts are after these events. And we do like a word cloud with these open text responses. The two words that come up at the top are, on the one hand, community, and on the other hand, colleagues. So this, I think, demonstrates the best, the connection, the emotional connection that is made when you participate in this event with your team members, whether a virtual setting or an in-person setting. You're connecting to your community, and at the same time and equally, you also connect with your peers, and that triangle connects you to your employer.
Community and colleagues leads to the next topic I want us to talk about, which is mental wellness. Bipin, we'll start with you, but let's talk about the importance of mental wellness on employee satisfaction, and what is the role of a company there? How do we think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a very big answer, but I'll try and keep it chunk it into pieces. I think some of it is just being aware of the pulse of your employee, in terms of satisfaction, and going away from ratings, and maybe it's emojis, I don't know. But, I think one example I saw was on Workday, they would sort of survey the employee as they're doing their transaction on Workday to see how they were they happy or not happy. So those are some of the things. I think employee wellness comes in many flavors. One is just, mental wellness, physical health, as well as financial. So these are sort of three key players for anyone from an employee lens. So let's start with the mental wellness. I think, just being, as I mentioned, being purposeful with the benefit design and what makes sense for your population is going to be key. Not everyone does well with telehealth. In fact, telehealth is great. It's blossomed because of COVID, but now we're sort of trying to decide, what is the quality of the information or the care that's being given. And there's work on that. So the national NCQA is actually going about sort of creating quality standards. So that will help us as employers to understand what we're giving for employee solutions. I think wellness offerings, carefully curated is really important. Again, it goes back to the question of, awareness and engagement. Another thing, so I talked about, physical and financial. One study that we did last year across 2,000 employees internationally was that, if you can personalize the journey, over 2/3 of the people are willing to give some health and financial information if you can personalize it to their needs. So that's a really interesting nugget to think about when you start to sort of think about using AI to sort of drive these personalized journeys, using signals from the platform to nudge people in the right direction. I think that also adds to it. I think, and so, I think it's not one answer fits all. And I think it also depends on the industry sector as well. If you're manufacturing, you're probably going to be having more on-site, on the floor events to try and sort of make sure people are tying in. From a healthcare utilization perspective, what I see also that's been effective is, some employers will have on-site, near-site clinics and on-site nurses. And I think just having that anonymity for people to go and approach and seek help is very important. I think community events are really key here. One other interesting thing was how the supervisor or the manager responded to the individual was really key, and that was a huge factor in retention. So there's multiple elements, but that's kind of the way I sort of think about it.
Does anybody else want to jump in on this one, thinking about emotional wellness and mental wellness does tie to some of the community conversation we were having? How are you thinking about that at your companies? Millette? Sorry.
It's funny because I use that for people to remember how
Someone
to pronounce
gave
it.
me that right in the green room. So
So I think for us, we really tapped into our business resource groups to ask the question, like, what is it that you want to see from new benefits? What types of things are you really looking for? And we have been fortunate to collaborate between our benefits team and our BRNs to really help us figure out what is the best way to provide these benefits, to have access to them, and then what do you actually need? Because I think everybody is different. The other thing that we've done, and again, shout out to all of the resource groups and the volunteerism that happens with that, because I know all of you have probably experienced in your companies a lot of like up and downs because of what's happening globally, what's happening with the war, et cetera, and all the stress that comes along with that. So our resource groups have adopted some really great practices like resets and safe spaces and places where our employees can go and really let their hair down, but to really just be able to be comfortable in chatting about what's on their mind, what's impacting them. And I've seen that grow quite tremendously over the last 2.5 years. And I think also the other things that we want to pay close attention to is how many people really know how to maximize EAP. And one of our global chairs of our Ability BRN used to work with EAP and was able to really break it down in bite-sized pieces so that people fully understood what kind of assistance you can actually get from it, how to use it, and talk about any hurdles that you may run into. And that right there was something that was really, not a lot of work to do it, but extremely impactful, because a lot of people people were kind of, shy about raising their hand to say they really didn't know how to use EAP. Or who they needed to talk to, or do I even feel comfortable using an internal resource? And so I think that all companies are really digging into this more, because when Gen Z and others are coming into the workplace, and the ones that are there now, mental health is no longer just a nice to talk about. It's going to be a requirement from people coming into your organizations, wanting to know, what are you doing to add to my mental health to make sure it's better? What access do I have to the care I need? And they're making these decisions up front. So if you don't have this information clearly laid out on your website and things like that, they're not going to know what you're doing. So half of the battle for us as employers is to get better at telling the story of how we're actually giving our employees what they need in order to have the best healthy life and the best versions of themselves showing up in the workplace. So I think the work is not going to ever be done with that, but we're off to a good start, I think.
Wonderful. EAP cheat codes. Everybody needs EAP cheat codes. Great. I think that we are at time for this panel. I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your productivity tips.